Thank you very much, Annette. So, good morning.
Muy buenos días.
Mesdames, Messieurs,
Sí.
bonjour.
Good morning. So, good morning to
Muy
everyone.
buenos días a todas y a todos.
We are just. I have to adjust the volume for 1 second because I'm getting the translation sound.
Maybe we better just hang on for a second, Jaime. Actually, I think the translation is happening live. I think instead
simultaneous, yeah.
Right, but okay, back
but
to you.
For some reason, I'm listening to the translation.
We are checking that just a couple of seconds.
No. Just in case, I'm listening to the two translations at the same time now.
So do I. So I think
Yeah, same.
Something that doesn't happen like this, right? What is translation?
I think the interpretation button has just come on now, so I have a feeling we're probably okay now, Jaime. And then if those who want translation, they will click on the interpretation button at the bottom. So I think back to you.
Right. So should we start then?
Yep, I think you're all set.
Yep. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who is connected. My name is Jaime Saavedra. I'm the Global Director for Education at the World Bank. And I would like to welcome everyone to this new event as part of a webinar series that it was started several months ago. It's a framework for reopening school that is organized jointly by UNICEF, UNESCO, and the World Bank. I'm extremely happy to continue having a very close relationship between the three institutions in order to work together to support the country efforts during this pandemic. So look, the idea of this webinar is to help countries to share their experiences in the implementation of a school, this school reopening process. I mean, that is a very extremely complex challenge that all countries are facing, and in which decision making has to be done on many technical issues regarding academic and pedagogical themes on how to do remote assessment. I mean, how to continue implemented blended learning, how to manage the changing behaviors of different actors, how to manage technology better, how to make sure that kids are safe when they go back to school, and countless issues that have to be defined by authorities if we want to go during this process of going back to school. Today's webinar will focus on safe reopening of school in a group of countries, the challenges and diverse responses of countries addressing these issues. We will have today colleagues from Ivory Coast, from Tanzania, Pakistan, Tanzania, and Uruguay talking about their experiences. And we really thank them for their participation and the possibility of sharing experience among them and with many colleagues from around the world. I just want to mention something that we have been discussing with many of you, that in a way we are in a hurry, right, to safely bring kids back to school. Attending school is actually one of the most important things in life, particularly for the most vulnerable children, but in general. School is critical for the social experience that education is. School is critical as a great equalizer. School is critical for the social-emotional well-being of children. And as we have seen, and education is a social phenomenon. So that is space for interaction between teachers, students, parents, and the community is absolutely essential. Now, we have been in a process in which many countries close schools, but I mean, closing was easy. I mean, obviously the reopening process, it's much harder, but I mean, but we have seen that the losses of learning that kids are incurring is dramatically or potentially dramatically high, despite all the efforts that countries have been doing. Our last calculations that we have had at the World Bank show that learning poverty, which is this indicator that shows what's the percentage of kids who by age 10 cannot read and understand a text, which is already very high before the pandemic. It was 53% in low and middle income countries, so extremely high number, right? I mean, more than half of kids not being able to have the fundamental skills, and we're talking before the pandemic. I mean, this could rise from 53 to 63%, right? In the if we don't continue both investing and in remote learning in the countries that are still doing so as part of their coping strategies, but also if we don't do the right actions as children start going back to school. We were already living a world, in addition to living a world with high learning poverty, we were living a world with highly unequal inequality of opportunities, right? And something that, as we see, can be getting worse as a consequence of the pandemic. Because obviously, despite all the efforts of countries in order to cope with this strategy through remote learning, I mean, the kids from from lower socioeconomic backgrounds have lower possibilities of having an internet connection, of having a good space and an environment at home in order to be able to read. So, despite all the efforts that we are doing in terms of TV, radio, WhatsApp, I mean, obviously, poorer children are not having enough of a substantive experience in terms of education, and this is happening already for many months now. So in a way, we, as I was saying at the beginning, we are in a hurry, right, in order to make sure that kids have the right education experience. And returning to school safely is an urgent priority for all regions. But education systems throughout this process must be prepared for a careful and safe return to education. We need, and there are many decisions, I was saying, that has to be taken. And in a way, there's many of policy options, right? In addition to all the discussions of how to return safely from a health perspective, right? We need to look at what's the rates of infection in different countries and within countries, and then have all the sanitary conditions in order to go back to school. From an education, specifically from education perspective, we need to think about how to adjust school calendars. We need to pragmatically think of simplifying the curriculum as needed and define what's the minimum set of essential competencies that can be reasonably expected that children should be getting during this process. And at the moment that they start go back to school, we need to work on how to continue supporting teachers to adapt, first of all, to this remote learning environment, but also then to adapt and how to provide the right remedial education to students when they go back to school. We need to continue thinking of how to assess better how much learning is happening, both during their period in which children are not in school, but then when they return, to assess what's the new baselines from which we need to work. And finally, I want to mention, we need to continue, in addition to work with schools, with teachers, continue working with parents. They have seen that their role is extremely critical in terms of the education process of their kids. But the assumption that will have to continue, right, during, after schools reopen. The role of parents, the community, and what can happen at home, right, in terms of providing a space for a seamless continuation of the schooling process and integration of the education process between the school and the home is absolutely critical. So many areas in which we need to discuss, both for countries who are still with their school closed and for many countries in this process of starting opening schools. This is a very complicated process because we'll need to manage a huge uncertainty. We know that countries have already opened schools. At some point they have to close back right, and go back to remote learning, and that might happen in the near future. So we need to be prepared for that, to be resilient, right, and we prepare for this uncertainty. It's extremely important that we learn from different experiences how countries are managing this complex process, and work together, right, during the coming months, right, in order to make sure that we give the best possible experience to our kids. At some points will be when they're at home, and at some points will be when they can return safely to school. So before we go to discuss about these country experiences and learn from our colleagues, I want to give the stage to my good friend Stefania Giannini from UNESCO to give us a few words. And I want to thank to everyone for being in this call, and look forward a very productive discussion. Stefania, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Bonjour à tous et à toutes de Paris. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de vous rejoindre dans ce webinaire qui, comme mon cher ami et collègue Amy a déjà mentionné, le 7e d'une série qu'on a développée depuis le printemps de cette année, ensemble dans ce partenariat très fort, renforcé, je veux dire, dans cette crise du Covid-19 avec la Banque mondiale et l'UNICEF. Vraiment, petit mot, parce que je pense que mon collègue a déjà vraiment très bien expliqué tous les contextes, toutes les choses qui nous avons envisager dans cette expérience des webinaires sur la réouverture des écoles, et sur tous les défis et sur toutes les opportunités que les États membres et les ministres directement déjà mis en œuvre dans les passées semaines, et qu'à partir d'aujourd'hui, à partir de cette semaine, dans beaucoup de pays, ils sont à renouveler avec des pratiques, avec des politiques en quelque cas nouvelles. I want to say that, you mentioned the contest where we started with this interesting exercise, which is very much based on sharing information and best practices. And I think the role of our 3 organizations is really very much to collect data and to put at the service of governments and member states our knowledge and experience and expertise about this very delicate phase. But now we are in a different moment from the beginning of this process. Now many countries around the world recently started a new academic year. From my data I see now on the screen, today more than 100 countries have fully reopened their schools. Still 65 have reopened partially. That means restricting the hours of schooling or allowing only certain grades to attend in-person classes. And in other 36 countries, schools are still closed due to the sanitary crisis. That means affecting still around 600 million students around the world. So it's really a big issue. It's really a delicate political topic. And of course, there are still many lessons to be learned. And we can also take advantage of the experience we ran together over the last 5-6 months. To summarize a bit, just to complement the very inspiring and exhaustive presentation that Hemi has already done, I should say that today we have the opportunity to deep dive a bit on specific country experiences. We have 5 countries taking the floor from the south, and they will explain how they are currently managing the reopening of their school systems, whether it's full or partial reopening. So I think that the job to be done today, I saw in the room more than 200 people sitting, so it's still there is still a very high demand of knowing better and sharing more about these important activities of reopening schools. I think the job to be done in the coming weeks is really connecting a bit better the South and the north of the world, the east and the west. I mean, this is a global crisis. We said from the very beginning, maybe it's the first time in history that everybody realized that schools are really not only the place to learn, but the place for many other important dimensions that when schools are closed, definitely we miss very much, like social protection, nutrition, health, and everything like this. So I think that different angles and different perspectives can really give us the opportunity to collect an exhaustive pool of data that we are going then to share and maybe to elaborate on in the next as a next step in the next common publication on reopening, which is in our plans. So thank you very much. I leave the panel in very good hands, very experienced and still very inspiring, my dear friend Rob Jenkins from UNICEF in New York, now sitting, as I understand. So Rob, the floor is yours to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefania, and thank you also, Jaime. And again, like you've both mentioned, such a strong partnership between UNESCO, the World Bank, and ourselves here at UNICEF, something we greatly appreciate. I mean, the scale of this challenge and the need for collaboration and partnerships has never been stronger, and it's just something we greatly appreciate. So thanks again. So it is my sincere pleasure now to introduce our country speakers. We're going to begin with our dear colleagues from Cote d'Ivoire, who I see are online. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Infa Sandoko, who's the Deputy Director of Education for Health at the Ministry of Education, and Mr. Goli Lazare, the Deputy Director of Pedagogy at the Ministry of National Education. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules. We're very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts. May I pass the floor to you now, please?
D'accord. Merci beaucoup. Je suis Dr Infa Sandoko, sous-directeur de l'éducation pour la santé à la Démence, qui est la direction centrale qui s'occupe de tout ce qui est santé et social au niveau du ministère de l'Éducation nationale. Et donc, je vais m'appesantir sur le volet sanitaire, les dispositions prises pour la réouverture de l'école en Côte d'Ivoire. Et M. Goli prendra la parole pour intervenir sur le volet pédagogique. Parce que plusieurs directions ont travaillé en synergie d'action pour permettre cette réouverture sécurisée. Et donc, au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, après la notification du premier cas en mars 2020, on était déjà dans le deuxième trimestre de l'année scolaire. Et donc, les autorités, à travers le CNS, le Conseil national de sécurité, a pris des décisions et des mesures restrictives de regroupement et de déplacement. Et entre autres, la fermeture des établissements préscolaires, primaires, secondaires et supérieurs. Et ça, c'est depuis le 16 mars. Et donc, le gouvernement a mis en place un plan de riposte et de soutien économique. Riposte sanitaire, ça s'entend, sanitaire et humanitaire. Et donc, le ministère de l'Éducation a pris toute sa place dans ce plan-là. Et donc, des stratégies opérationnelles ont permis la réouverture de l'école dans le mois de mai. Et donc, grâce à des mesures fortes que le ministère a entreprises. Évidemment, avec le soutien des partenaires techniques financiers, notamment l'UNICEF. Alors, quelques actions fortes qui ont permis la réouverture de l'école en Côte d'Ivoire. Je précise avant de rentrer dans les actions fortes que dans les mesures restrictives, il y a eu le confinement de la capitale où l'épidémie sévissait, avec plus de 97% des cas notifiés. Et donc, l'Abidjan, qui est la capitale, était confinée, et contrairement à l'intérieur, où il y avait très peu ou des cas inexistants. Et donc, il fallait pour assurer une réouverture, convoyer tous les apprenants et les personnels qui étaient dans la capitale vers l'intérieur du pays. Et ceci a été fait tout en respectant l'application rigoureuse des mesures barrières, et notamment la distanciation physique. Et la reprise s'est faite avec des effectifs allégés, c'est-à-dire au niveau du primaire, tous les enfants sont allés à l'école, mais avec un système d'alternance au niveau des 6 niveaux. Et tout ceci pour respecter la distanciation physique dans les classes. Au niveau du secondaire, l'accent a été mis sur les classes d'examen parce qu'il fallait sauver l'année scolaire, permettre le déroulement des examens de fin d'année dans de bonnes conditions. Et donc, la priorité a été accordée aux classes d'examen, notamment 3e et terminale, qui représentent à peu près 29% de la cible. Et cela a permis de respecter la distanciation physique. Tout cela a permis d'achever les programmes et de faire les examens de fin d'année. Il a noté aussi qu'il y a eu une action forte qui est l'élaboration et la diffusion d'un protocole sanitaire avec l'appui de l'UNICEF toujours. Et ce protocole sanitaire était basé sur 5 principes fondamentaux, notamment le maintien de la distanciation physique, le respect des gestes barrières, le port du masque, le lavage des mains, et puis le nettoyage et la désinfection des locaux ou du matériel. Ce protocole avait un contenu dense qui donnait des orientations aux gestionnaires de l'école. Les mesures, il donnait des mesures depuis l'entrée à l'école, quelles dispositions et mesures il fallait observer à l'entrée des écoles. À l'intérieur des écoles, les dispositions et les mesures à observer dans les salles de classe, dans les salles de professeurs, les dispositions à la récréation entre les élèves, les dispositions dans les lycées à internat. Et donc, c'était un document guide d'orientation des gestionnaires de l'école pour leur permettre, n'est-ce pas, d'assurer rigoureusement la continuité de l'apprentissage des enfants et assurer les examens de fin d'année. Il y a aussi une action forte qui est la gestion des quelques cas qui se sont signalés dans les établissements, en liaison avec le ministère de la Santé. Et donc, ça s'est géré vraiment rigoureusement. Voilà.
D'accord. Peut-être en attendant qu'il puisse revenir sur d'autres aspects, je vais indiquer un certain nombre d'éléments du point de vue de la gestion pédagogique et éventuellement aussi administrative. Alors, il faut commencer par dire que dès la survenue de la COVID chez nous en Côte d'Ivoire, en mars 2020, et avec la première grande décision du Conseil national de sécurité, qui était la fermeture des établissements scolaires, une question fondamentale s'était posée. Comment justement assurer la continuité scolaire? Alors, le gouvernement a mis en place, à travers le ministère de l'Éducation nationale, le programme Mon école à la maison. C'est un programme qui se compose en fait en 3 grands volets. On enregistre des courts films qu'on appelle des capsules pédagogiques en rapport avec les leçons dans le programme officiel qu'on diffuse à la radio, à la télévision. On construit aussi les cours, plus ces mêmes capsules qu'on loge sur une plateforme. Et puis, il y a le traitement de toutes ces ressources aussi qu'on met sur les réseaux sociaux. Alors, nous avons appliqué ce programme-là jusqu'en mai, où on a assisté à la réouverture des établissements scolaires. Mais comme d'ores et déjà, on avait commencé à travailler avec les partenaires de l'éducation, avec tous les acteurs, on s'est réunis et on a mis en place un certain nombre de dispositions à prendre pour la réouverture des établissements. D'un point de vue pédagogique, par exemple, il était question de réaménager les programmes pour permettre à tous de les achever, ce qui a été fait et ce qui a permis en in fine de passer les examens à grand tirage. Et puis, lorsqu'il y a eu la réouverture, on s'est adapté à la situation parce que le programme avait d'abord concerné les classes d'examen, les CM2, les 3e et les terminales. Mais lorsque nous avons assisté à la réouverture des établissements, nous nous sommes orientés vers les classes intermédiaires et nos premières cibles avaient été les classes de 4e et les classes de première. Alors, avec la réouverture, il y a eu des missions de visite pour bien vérifier si les protocoles mis en place étaient respectés. Et maintenant, en termes de leçons apprises, nous nous sommes inspirés de tout cela pour construire un protocole beaucoup plus robuste et plus efficace encore pour la rentrée de l'année scolaire 2020-2021 qui a commencé le 14 septembre. Alors, du point de vue pédagogique, il y a 3 choses à retenir. Première chose qu'il faut retenir, on a proposé et obtenu que l'année se fasse désormais en semestre. Parce qu'en trimestre, il y avait trop de morcellement et tout le monde ne pouvait pas s'attendre à la nouvelle rentrée et qu'on serait déjà très avancé dans le temps. Donc, nous avons organisé l'année en semestre. Deuxièmement, nous avons procédé toujours au réaménagement des programmes avec un point fort, leur réduction d'environ 20 à 25-30% de façon générale, pour insister, comme le disait tout à l'heure l'une des personnalités sur le plateau, pour aller vraiment à l'essentiel. Donc ça, c'est cette deuxième disposition-là qui a été prise. Mais la troisième disposition qui a été prise, c'est que l'un dans l'autre, étant donné que même si dans notre cas, on estime qu'environ 80% de gens ont suivi nos programmes, il y a quand même les 20%. Et le fait qu'on n'ait pas pu forcément suivre la proportion pour tout le monde, on a mis en place un programme de renforcement qui consiste en fait en une espèce de révision générale sur les contenus du 3e trimestre. Et cela prendra fin en août, à la fin du mois, à la fin du mois d'octobre, le programme de révision générale prendra fin. Et donc, c'est à partir de ce moment-là que nous allons entamer les programmes de l'année scolaire proprement dite 2020-2021 en étant sûr que tous les élèves sont vraiment à niveau et sont capables d'assurer le reste des apprentissages pour le niveau suivant selon les cas. Donc, voici les dispositions qui ont été prises du point de vue pédagogique, mais du point de vue administratif aussi. Il y a eu des textes qui ont été pris pour mettre en place un certain nombre d'organes chargés de faire la surveillance des mesures barrières et de signaler chaque fois à l'autorité un certain nombre de choses. Donc, Monsieur Dr Mfa a quelques ajouts à faire, si vous permettez. On lui laisse à nouveau la parole.
Oui, comme il a dit, pour cette rentrée scolaire 2020-2021, il s'agit d'aller
thank you very much. If I may just come in, if we can just take maybe 2 more minutes to hear from our dear colleagues, although it is indeed very, very interesting and useful, there will be time later on to also loop back. So if I can just pass to our colleagues for a final 2 minutes, please.
Merci. Donc, en Côte d'Ivoire, il y a pour cette réouverture la mise en place des comités d'éveil COVID-19 au niveau central, présidé par Madame le ministre, et des comités d'éveil COVID-19 dans les régions, dans les directions régionales et dans les directions départementales. Et l'unité opérationnelle, c'est les cellules d'éveil dans les écoles. L'objectif, c'est de mettre en place un système véritable de communication et de sensibilisation lié à la pandémie pour permettre aux apprenants de s'approprier les tenants et les aboutissants de cette pandémie. De telle sorte que, en cas de situation d'alerte, il n'y ait pas de panique. Les dispositions ont été prises dans le protocole sanitaire pour remonter le cas en région et en centrale pour que l'école puisse fonctionner, en tout cas sans panique. Donc, c'est ce que je voudrais ajouter. Merci beaucoup de votre aimable attention.
Merci beaucoup. We'll just move now immediately on to the next country case study, which will be Jordan. Let me just appreciate our dear colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you very much for those insights. Very, very useful. We will come back to you and others during the discussion. Now, pleased to introduce Ms. Lama Al Natur, who's the director of the Donor Coordination Unit at the Ministry of Education in the Kingdom of Jordan. May I please pass over to you now, Ms. Lama Al Natur.
Lama is online. Perhaps we could move to the next presentation and come back to Jordan.
Sure. Just I think she's still on mute. I don't know, Lama, do you want to just test maybe unmute? If not, we'll absolutely come back. No? Okay, so let me just
there she is.
Go ahead, Lama. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Lama, we can hear you fine. Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for coming. Over to you, Lama.
Hello, hi everybody. And let me start by thanking you for this opportunity to present the Jordan point of view in terms of COVID-19 emergency response and remedial and sustainability as well. You know that the global spread of COVID-19 pandemic led to increasingly firm measures in Jordan, including the closure of schools, the imposition of quarantine, which suspended education in all of its grades and all of its forms and modalities in public and private school. And unfortunately, the most affected were the vulnerable students. And these really were majorly affected because their well-being like circumstances and also their foundational skills are like minor or not strong compared to other students. So what did Jordan do in that regard? We really worked like both on both sides of physical and psychosocial measures in students and at schools. We tried not only to cover the educational aspects, but also to cover the self-resilience and self-efficacy of students and teachers. So what did we do? MOE responded from day one to COVID-19 crisis by first we established the education during emergency team, which combined all of our educational resources of curriculum, training, supervision, technology, and also the planning units. We also designed sectoral standard operating procedures to organize the ministerial work towards continued education. We worked with the Ministry of Health. We worked with the VTC, the Vocational Training Center. We worked also with the Ministry of Digital Economy and Leadership, and with the Ministry of Planning. We thirdly established our own emergency plan. So how to respond to emergency situations, which mainly is affecting the continuation of education. This education, like during emergency plan, really tackled all of the stages to respond to the emergency, the COVID-19 specifically. It introduced 3 phases of response: the immediate response, the remedial, which is the recovery after the phase out of the COVID-19, and the sustainability of the modalities that were introduced during the emergency, which is mainly the e-learning. This emergency plan, fortunately, was fully implemented so far for the response and the remedial, of course, with the support and continuous collaboration of our educational partners. The donors, the implementers really helped us. They leveraged all of the possible support during this COVID-19 emergency, which were really focused on the education sector and the education response. We found after that a need to establish a roadmap for sustaining the educational operations, which is mainly part of the main services of priority at governmental sector. So we established this roadmap because this roadmap would tell on an action level basis or what does each department or division need to do at the Ministry of Education, and what is also the roles and responsibilities of the autonomous partners that we deal with on a daily basis outside the ministry. After that, we designed a school reopening guidelines and procedures. This procedures was rich enough to tackle all measures and procedures in terms of health and safety, educational procedures, and also psychosocial procedures. We have tackled all layers of the community, which are mainly not only schools of their staff, but also the parents, the community, and also the students themselves. So we established messages, strong messages that address each of these segments. After that, we started heavily working on our platform, the e-learning platform that introduced all of the content that we delivered on e-learning basis. So this platform was at the beginning not interactive. So it was mainly combining TV sessions and online sessions that were recorded. But after that, we found a need to put a peer-to-peer evaluation and peer-to-peer also interaction between the teacher and the student. And this is what we added through different channels of communication, whether Microsoft, Zoom. And we also put them at the beginning on both the Noor Space and the new platform that we designed. And after that, we managed to keep on the operation of those peer-to-peer interaction. And because of this interactivity, we managed to introduce the assessments from schools for all students, which we called the mid-semester assessments. They were delivered completely, and the accessibility of students were 80%. So 80% engaged and interacted with the online assessment and the online sessions, and 20% only did not engage. We have served all of the grades from 1st to 12th, and we managed also to deliver the final assessment and close this year with final assessment on online basis on Darsak, the new platform that we have introduced, including the high school. Those were the engaged students. How about the non-engaged students? The non-engaged students that are mainly lacking technology, they couldn't connect online. We managed, fortunately, to reach out to 80% also of them through caravans that were delivered at their locations to deliver all the sessions to them physically, face-to-face by trained teachers. The others, we managed to send tablets for them to connect through internet. Unfortunately, there was still actually not 20%, but 16% that we couldn't reach out to. But we managed to send printed kits to them once the COVID-19 phased out. And those printed kits really revised all of the content of the second semester that was not physically delivered. Because we really cared about the psychosocial situation of students, we have developed a lot of rich content to tackle the psychosocial self-efficacy, self-resilience of teachers and students. We delivered them online, and we also delivered them as key messages on our website and all of the media channels, through our website, through TV, through radio, because we have designed a very comprehensive going back to school campaign with our, of course, partners. This campaign not only made sure to deliver the lost content of the second semester through learning kits, but also to deliver the psychosocial support to all students and their parents, and to introduce the e-learning in a better vision and a better modality, to engage the parents more, to get or to secure the buy-in of students and their community more on the e-learning importance and the different modalities that they can interact with. We have also managed to reopen schools, although for a very short term, but because we have developed our health protocol and going back to school protocol, and we have trained all of our staff on this protocol, how to make sure that the school is prepared, that they are prepared, all the health measures are ready. and schools are infected and sanitized, we managed to reopen schools. But how did we reopen them? We made sure that we customized the modalities based on the health situation of schools themselves and the preparedness and the capacity that they have in terms of infrastructure, of course. So we have put a threshold, an indicator threshold, which is a security of 1 meter distance between each student. If this 1 meter, square meter, distance is secured, then the school can be classified as a green area and can open in full capacity. If they cannot reach this 1 square meter, this is considered as a green area, but with restrictions. What does restrictions mean? That they have to switch to hybrid model, to rotational model. They have to combine face-to-face and online. There is also other schools that they were isolated. These were red zone. We delivered e-learning to them in full modality. The other schools that they were quarantined, but they're not isolated, we delivered education to them in isolated groups, which means they cannot interact. The number of each student in each class or in each group is 10 to 15 students maximum, and they cannot interact. They cannot gather at the same time. We have to leave time difference or time elapse between each group. So we managed to open schools because COVID-19 cases were really dropping down to almost zero. But unfortunately, a second wave hit Jordan very, very early. We had to close schools, but the teachers are there. They're still working and operating. The students are not allowed. And now we reached to a phase where all grades are not allowed. We started gradually. I mean, we started by just stopping the 4 to 12. Now we stop all grades, unfortunately, until further notice. But the e-learning is continued. Our staff are trained. The students can receive all of the training that they want through guidelines on the Dersak itself, on how to use the Dersak platform. Also, the sessions are there, available on TV modality and on online or platform modality.
So Lama, I think we'll just encourage you to wrap up just in terms, because we're just out of time, and you'll see
the lessons learned out of this experience of Jordan is that the distance learning in Jordan still cannot replace the physical learning. We're still not in a mindset to do that. We still need further training and awareness in terms of community and also the educational staff. There should be an interactive learning, which is combining the hybrid model, the blended learning model, and also the rich research that the students have to also use to enrich their skills and knowledge. We also need to interact and engage parents to get their buy-in and to spread adequate awareness to them.
Thank you.
The challenges that we face as Jordan is the influx that we had, unfortunately, coming from abroad, the infrastructure that is still not strong in terms of technology, and also the community acceptance to e-learning since it's a new modality, and also, of course, the not very strong skills of teachers and the educational staff on the e-learning modalities and the technology. But we are working on a continual basis to address those challenges and introduce improvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lama, and thanks again to our dear colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire. We are now going to be turning to a poll. Please, I'd encourage both the presenters to look through the chat. There's been some questions. While we're doing that and comments, while we're doing that, I'm going to encourage all participants to refer to the poll that's now currently on their screen. And the question is, what are the most challenging aspects of implementing safe school operations? And you heard many innovative approaches in Jordan and also many from Côte d'Ivoire. So keeping those in mind and your own experience, what are the most challenging aspects? And I'd encourage you to now vote on your offer your opinion to this question and select what you feel is the best answer, and then click submit, and it will we will see the results come on the screen. So if everyone can just now vote, you will see. While we are compiling those, I think I will now pass to our next speaker and encourage them also to, well, actually now you see the results on the screen. Thank you to our colleagues managing this. And you'll see what's interesting is, and actually there were some comments in the chat during the presentations, the participants online here, over 250 people or close to 250 people, are expressing that their most challenging aspect of implementing safe school operations is ensuring physical distancing in schools. And a chat was also mentioning outside of school, meaning in the playgrounds, etc. And I know our colleagues both from Jordan and Cote d'Ivoire has spoken to that. And I'll encourage the upcoming speakers to also speak to that in their presentations. So it is now my pleasure to invite our representative from Pakistan to present their country case study, and I encourage them to stay within the 10 minutes. It's Ms. Umbreen Arif. Thank you very much. She is the technical advisor in the Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Rob. There is so much to say and it will be difficult to remain in the 10 minutes, but please stop me whenever you feel I've crossed the time. So very honestly, reopening school decision has been one of the most difficult decision-making process that I've been involved in, because it involves the health of the children. Right from the beginning, in the education sector was very, very clear that this is a decision that cannot be made by the education sector. It's a health sector and health experts' decision when schools should reopen and how they should reopen. Pakistan had formed right at the beginning of the pandemic a National Command and Operations Center, the NCOC, and that was where all the decisions regarding all sectors were taken based on data. So similarly for education, it was almost like a 2-month long process of coming to the school reopening decision. In those 2 months, there was a very close watch on data of COVID cases that were coming from the country, almost like on a daily basis. Those COVID-based cases were tracked. Where are they appearing? Why are they appearing? Which community is most vulnerable? And after tracking the COVID cases, there was also a data crunching that was done for this the education sector. I won't say schools, because the education sector involves tech walk institutes, universities, colleges. So the school reopening decision was for all education institutes of the country. And just to share the quantum that we are talking about more than 300,000 education institutes and more than 40 million children that needed to be brought back to the education institution. So it was a very tough decision. Based on data of the schools that we had from across the country, a phased manner of reopening was decided. Although our health experts told us that younger children are much more safer, and there have been less incidences of younger children getting COVID, and it might be better to start at the primary. However, the logistics of moving such a large population of children, which required buses to move, which required teachers to move. So the decision was made to open the higher education and university sector first, and then see what the experience would be, how schools respond to SOPs, and how schools are actually able to implement the SOPs. So that decision was made to do a phased reopening. During that phased reopening, there is a random testing, a COVID testing plan that is being implemented by the National Command and Operations Center as well. So a whole random testing of students at the education institutions was a plan, and it was decided that if we do not see a rise in COVID cases, due to the reopening of higher education institutions and colleges, then we'll move to the second phase. The second phase will be monitored for about 5 to 10 days. And then the last phase, which is the primary schools, will be reopened. So it was a very data-driven decision making that happened in opening the schools in a staggered, in a phased manner. Obviously, we have many schools that have high enrollments. So there is a model of staggering classes. There are 3 key SOPs that we have been focusing on. Masks, safe distance, and washing hands. The 3 have remained the basic elements that we are pushing the schools to comply with, and also ensuring that any school that is not complying with them, the issues are addressed. The education sector, again, like I said, is not alone in the monitoring. There's a whole monitoring plan along with that. With the safe reopening, the district authorities and the municipal corporations have also been made partners in this whole monitoring process. The random testing at the education institutions has proved very useful, and to this date we haven't seen a spike in COVID because of education institutions reopening, which is very encouraging. This is not to say that schools have not closed or education institutions have not been closed because of COVID cases. So there are those school closures and education institutions closures that are happening, but we are following the smart lockdown approach. I believe it is called the TTQ. It is test, trace, and quarantine. So there are health guidelines, like I mentioned, the 2-month phase that we had, the preparation phase. Health took the first initiative of developing the safe school reopening guidelines, because they've been developing the guidelines, safe guidelines for all sectors. So they took the first initiative, made health guidelines for schools, and then the education sectors contributed to those guidelines, adding the academic aspects of school reopening into those health guidelines. So they are a joint effort of health and education sectors. In those health guidelines, there are very clear measures of what to do if a student or a teacher or a non-teaching staff is found to have a COVID positive case, which class to close, whether to close the full school, how many days to close. Based on those guidelines, we also developed frequently asked questions that were translated in the local language as well. So, and there was a wide dissemination of those guidelines. A communication plan has been an important part of this as well, to spread health and hygiene messages. One of the most important messages that we've had to give to the general public has been that the pandemic hasn't ended. Fortunately for Pakistan, the numbers have been very good in terms of very less COVID cases, but then again, the worry is that it creates a perception that the pandemic is over, and people become relaxed about using the SOPs that have been developed. So we've used the ringtones, the mobile messaging. So every time my phone calls somebody, I have to hear that the schools have reopened, but you have to follow those guidelines. So there was a very widespread communication plan that accompanied the school reopening. There was the public opinion has been divided on whether to open schools or to keep them closed. Obviously, there was a lot of pressure from private school organizations. Like I mentioned, we have more than 40 million children in schools. Almost half of them are in private sector schools, and some of the smaller private sector schools that depend on fees have actually had to close down. So that was in the long term a big academic loss that we were facing. So the challenge right now is to keep following the data. and following where the COVID cases are appearing, ensuring that there is no panic that is created to damage the safe reopening of schools. Obviously, the sanitation and hygiene conditions at schools remain a challenge, and schools have been trying to address them at the local level. And I must congratulate our development partners, UNICEF, UNESCO, World Bank, all have stepped up and provided Pakistan the support to tackle the wash aspects, the school hygiene aspects. It would have been a very difficult thing to do all on our own. We haven't encouraged a distribution of masks and things that people can make at home. We are encouraging that the making of masks at home is encouraged, so that those funds can be utilized for other things like providing makeshift hand washing facilities at the schools and ensuring that the academic needs of the children can be met.
I
So
will just
those
wrap
are
up
some
in one minute, please.
So I will not go towards the academic side and leave it for another decision day, but there's been a huge academic orientation on reducing the syllabus and crunching the syllabus to adjust to the number of days that are now available in the annual year. But I'll close here and I'll again say the social aspects are so amazing. The girls are so happy to come back to school because they haven't had the opportunity to meet their friends for a very long time. So it's a joyful thing to open the schools, but also a very worrying aspect.
Thank you very much. Very substantive, and I really greatly appreciate all the insights on brainums. I'm sure the participants do as well. Let me move straight over to our colleague from the government of from Tanzania. I'm sorry. It's Mr. Ayub Kafulilo. Can I pass over to you, please, to share the experience in Tanzania?
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm so grateful to be part of this discussion. I'll share a screen from the presentation I have prepared. When you see my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, right. So I'll be very brief. Actually, I'm representing the government colleagues who have not been able to join me because of some reasons. Quickly, I'll run through the background. The first case of COVID-19 was announced in Tanzania, was reported on 16th of March. And on 17th of March, all schools and colleges were closed. And a joint task force to respond to the closure of schools was formed. And this involved the colleagues from the Ministry of Education, the local government authorities, and the UNICEF, as well as other UN agencies, which were supporting the background. And then this task force developed some key messages to guide the parents and children on how to stay safe while at home and continue learning. You can see in my screen, on my right-hand side, is one of the key messages that was sent to parents to inform them on how to guide them on how to support children to continue learning while at home. And the other thing, the task force developed a home learning package in a print copies and also a media-based learning program, which was being broadcasted through television and radio, and this was available to school levels of education except tertiary education. Universities and colleges did not include it. Approach to school reopening, for us, we can trace the background from the Eid al-Fitr celebration, which happened on 23rd of May. The government allowed people to just gather and celebrate together, go on to beaches and enjoy and just taking any precaution. There were no masks, no social distancing. People were allowed to mix up without any consideration of or worries of COVID-19. And after about 10 days, they realized that there was no issues with COVID-19. Then they announced the reopening of schools. But there were no data. Actually, I will share this also at the end, that in Tanzania, we did not have data, and that it's difficult to say there was no case of COVID, but I think based on the analysis from the data that were submitted from hospitals, they did not see serious cases. So they started opening school in phases, like the colleagues from Pakistan shared. The first phase involved the senior education levels, involving universities, colleges, and advanced secondary education, particularly Form 6 students. Actually, these were supposed to sit for examination. After they opened for about 3 weeks, and they were monitoring the situation, looking if there were any serious cases of illness that had COVID-related symptoms. But for all this period of 3 weeks, there were no cases. And also they tried to also monitor if they were following the guidelines, and found that actually that they were able to manage to follow the guides. Then afterwards, in 3 weeks, they opened for the rest of the education levels: pre-primary, primary, lower secondary education, and the advanced secondary education. There were important measures that were taken in the process of opening up schools. First, there was a grant which was developed for all schools and all levels of education on how to take all the necessary precautions against COVID-19, reporting process, and how they can identify symptoms and take action. These guidelines were distributed to all learning institutions. There were some also posters that were developed, particularly for lower grades, to guide the children on what to do and how to do, and also identifying learners with the symptoms of COVID-19. A hotline number was created for emergency call in case teachers or children would find someone in school has symptoms related to COVID-19. And then an assessment was conducted also to assess the wash situation in most of schools. And we conducted the assessment by using the existing data to understand what is the wash situation, water sources, and so on. And then provided the hand washing facilities, as you can see on the picture. Everyone received the bucket and the other soap and the other facilities that would support them to wash their hands regularly while they're at schools. Posters were also distributed, as I said earlier. These provided all the necessary guidance on what to do. As you can see, these are some of the posters that are distributed in all schools. Children had to get oriented on how to observe these procedures. There were some challenges. Actually, the biggest one is that we did not have data. As I said earlier, one of the biggest problems in Tanzania is that from the beginning, I think just in 1 month, we reported the cases and the data were being provided, but afterwards we stopped reporting the rate of infections. So we understand that there have not been serious cases reported, but we don't have evidence on based on the data collected from hospitals and health institutions that would assure us that the situation is calm, really. And we had also issue of water, that some schools did not have sufficient supply of water, reliable source of water, and in this case, children had to bring water from home. And this was a bit a problem because some of them would not manage to replenish the hand washing buckets and barrels for the whole day. They can manage to have water up to sometimes, and then later on they have water. Maintaining social distance, as reported by other colleagues, this was a critical problem because we have a lot of overcrowded classrooms and schools. So I think this was very difficult. And but we had to accept it and allow it to operate in that open situation where children would just interact. Some parents would not afford masks, and also there were cases of children who could not afford to put on masks because they had some breathing issues. So overall, the use of mask just ended within a short time. I think use of mask was observed for the first 2 weeks. Later on, there was no use of mask in Tanzania, and learning just continued as normal. To conclude, schools have not been any single case officially reported on a child who has developed the symptoms which are related to COVID. And if there are cases, I think those which are minor and have not been taken as issues that could be reported. And generally in Tanzania, life is back to normal. Everything is going as usual. Schools and learning are conducted like there is no COVID, and the social distancing is no longer there. People are interacting, are involving in sports, conference, and all kinds of gatherings are going on as normal. Generally, we can say that life is going on as usual, although we don't have data. We don't know actually if there are people who are still in the hospital with symptoms of COVID, but overall, everyone is just free. That's all from Tanzania.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you to both again. We are now just going to do a quick second poll. The question is, following an extended period of closure, in your opinion, what is the most effective measure to manage learning loss? And there are 4 options there. I'd encourage you to each take a look at what you think is the most effective measure to manage learning loss. And while you are voting, I'm going to now once again thank our presenters so far. A lot of discussions and questions and comments in the chat. Thank you very much to everyone for participating in that. And then I'm going to be passing to Miss Adriana Astriamiono, who is the Education Director in the Educational Planning of the National Administration of Public Administration. Here is the results of the poll. And indeed, you can see the vast majority of us feel that we need to be focusing collectively on offering remedial and accelerated programs. And all 4 speakers have talked to that, and indeed a critical challenge for all of us, particularly for reaching children, vulnerable children and children in remote locations who are not as connected as others. So can I now pass to our colleague in Uruguay, please? You now have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Rob. I will be sharing the, let's see if I can do it.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well,
we see.
Yeah, you see it? Oh, yes.
There it comes. Okay. All set.
Well, thank you for the invitation indeed. And here is my presentation. I would just start about talking about the ecosystem of school reopening, just to make sure you can see where I am. Uruguay is a very tiny country. There you can see a map of South America. Uruguay is a tiny green spot in the map. We are a 3.5 million people population and 1 million students with 55,000 teachers, just to have a glance of it. And just to start our process, very similar to most of the countries that preceded the presentation, there are 5 crucial dates, I would say. March the 1st, because we had a government change. We had a new government at office on March the 1st. March 13 was the date where the first cases were known, just similar to Tanzania, I think. And March 14 was the date when the schools were closed, so just the day afterwards. April 13 is the date when the first sector of economy recovered activity, which was construction of buildings. Everything else was closed. Shopping centers, public places, well, every space or event that meant gathering of people was prohibited. And April 22nd, that is the most important date for us, is the date where the first schools were reopened. Those were the rural schools because of several motives. I would say that the ecosystem of this process is sustained on daily communication and news release, led by the president of the country, especially during the first weeks, not today, but during March, especially, and April, by the main authorities, the Ministry of Public Health, the Ministry of Education, the President of Public Education, which is where I work, and the president himself. And especially for education, he was very assertive and very present. And there I have a very small graphic that tends to or intends to explain how the decision-making scheme worked. The presidency, led obviously by the president of the country, was at the center of this scheme. And there the GACH is honorary scientific group that advises the president, that was established early in April. And those are the ones that approve the protocols and that establish the main measures, but according to research and academic and scientific data. The Ministry of Education, of course, and the GACH involves the Public Health Ministry, of course, and also the public education organization. So the president at the middle, gathering information and talking with all those people, which is a kind of scheme of decision-making that was established very early in April and still goes on. I think there were a number of clever decisions of the reopening process, especially to bet for transparency and regularity in the information management, especially because this built a very strong sense of confidence in society. That's why what I was pointing that a new government appeared in March the 1st. So it was a very strong proof for the new government to, of course, to take office, but also to struggle and to face this emergency. So they, from the first day, were giving data and facing the situation and explaining with very openly what was going on with ongoing information every day. It was a very extremely early decision-making, I say, because it was very soon when the crisis started. It was a very strong leadership of the new president, and with a quick and permanent strategic alliance I put here with academic and research milieu, and that really built on confidence in social, in society in general, not only the people that support the government because they voted it, but also in general. That was very, very important. A method that I think that proves to work is a high number of testing. This started, let's say, 1.5 months or 2 months after the first case. It was not so at the beginning. The isolation of the sick people, the follow-up of the epidemiologic trace of each case, and this is this kind of a bubble system. I think that the colleague from Pakistan was saying TTQ, I think, the testing, tracing, and quarantine. It is very similar to ours. And then going to education, from the first day, from April the 22nd, The criteria were to build on graduality, so opening different kinds of schools in different regions with different situations gradually, and the voluntary attendance to school. So families, parents are not forced to send students to school. And the decisions were built on basically the priority to low connectivity schools. We have Plan Ceibal, which is a 1 laptop per child plan that is spread all over the country. So every student has a public system, public education laptop or tablet. But that is not enough because connectivity is an issue. So where low connectivity was present, especially rural areas, rural schools, that's why we started there. Then reopening was decided. And also low socioeconomic status schools. So the poorer schools were the first to come back to face-to-face education. Let's see. Okay. The implementation of safe school operations involved the collective creation of protocols. I think that as elsewhere, the health authorities and the education authorities participated there, and there were clear hygiene principles, as I think in every other participant presenter has showed, especially social or physical distancing, 1.5 meters, the regular washing of hands, the alcohol is present in every classroom, every space in schools, the disinfection of buildings and spaces regularly. At the beginning, we started classes Mondays and Tuesdays. Wednesdays was for washing and disinfecting schools, and then Thursday, Friday, again, coming back to school, to classes. But now we have full days of presence with the disinfection at the end of the journey, of the day. And of course, ventilation. So those were the principles that every protocol has to respect. And there is a specific protocol if a case appears in a school. And we have had cases in schools, different from other countries. And when that happens, it triggers a kind of measures, emergency measures that have worked because the case is isolated and the school or only the class the group is closed, and then it is reopened as the tests show they are negative again.
Adriana, we're just gonna, yes. Oh, you're great. You're at your last slide. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Can you see the outcomes and challenges?
Yes, maybe just a quick summary of that, please. Thanks.
Okay, yes, I'm just finishing. Well, our outcomes are being able to organize this reopening because it was very complex, very stressing, and full of logistic issues. It showed a lot of flexibility and creativity by part of schools, teachers, and families. So we have a very centralized system, but this experience showed that giving autonomy to schools and teachers was very good. As a whole, we have nearly 70% attendance at schools face-to-face. Now we have all rural schools open with full capacity and full daily schedule, and other whole journey schools too, but with limited time because physical distancing is the most difficult issue we have here. So we have to part groups in half and so on and so on. And we have a lot of challenges still to face ahead. Face-to-face versus distance learning is quite a challenge for teachers. It is not the same. We have to have a lot of training, in-service training for that. There are still high levels of students not attending. It depends on the school, on the region, etc. But it varies between 25% or 50% some days. We have the issue of learning outcomes. We are thinking about remedial courses for summer. Summer is for us December, January, February. probably due to governance change of education, we had some problems at the intermediate level. Let's say inspectorate, supervising, we have problems there, supervising what happened really at school, at the school level. And we really have a transportation issue. It is not available for all teachers and students in the whole country. So there we have some shortage and some difficulties in being able to get to the schools. So that is all I had prepared. So I'm open to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very, very much. Very substantive, very helpful. And let me just take this opportunity once again to thank all 5 country representatives. It was so interesting, I'm sure, for all, and you can see from the chat and others how valuable it is for people to hear the challenges, but also the innovations that have been taking place. I know we're down to just a very few minutes, but I didn't want to cut short the presentations, at least more than I had to, just recognizing how valuable they are. Annette, can I pass over to you now? I understand you are going to run a very brief Q&A. Annette?
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Rob. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you to the participants. We have received a lot of questions, and unfortunately, we have only a couple minutes left until the end of the session. So we will try our best to address some of your questions. You asked about hygiene measures, connectivity, the involvement of parents in the strategies, also about hybrid learning modalities, and many other topics. We have picked one question, but we could ask from each speaker. Let's start maybe with Umbreen in Pakistan. So as you have seen in the first poll that we conducted, we have seen that ensuring physical distancing in schools, it causes significant difficulties, and the audience confirmed that. So in your country, how many students do you allow in the classroom at the time, and how do you ensure physical distancing during class breaks? This is especially difficult for primary levels and kindergarten levels. So could you share something about that? Umbreen, you have the floor.
So Annette, because we are dealing with a big number of schools, 300,000, and the context varies from school to school. The staggering at the school level depends on the space available in the school and the enrollments. We have some schools that have very high enrollments and with a student-teacher ratio of as high as 1:60, but we also have cases where the student-teacher ratios are much smaller. So it very honestly varies from school to school. This is a local decision. In some schools, they have had to stagger days. So the students come, half the class comes on one day and the rest of the class comes on the other day. In some schools, they have had to do shifts. So one class comes in the morning and one class comes in the afternoon. According to our SOPs, breaks and physical activity outside in the grounds are not allowed, especially for those schools that function in smaller buildings. So it's very honestly a school-based decision. It's just that they have to follow the physical spacing and the distancing.
Thank you, Umbreen. Thank you. Adriana, how do you deal with a similar issue in Uruguay? How do you deal with physical distancing? If you could give us a quick summary of 1 minute so we can also go to Tanzania and in the other countries. Thank you.
Yes, sure. We have the physical distancing conditions the display of students in a classroom. So we have to measure the classrooms and we have to establish some number of chairs by space. So that means sometimes that you have to part in half a group. So the group, as my colleague earlier was saying, half the group comes in the morning, half the group comes in the afternoon, or one whole group comes 1 week and the other half comes the following week. It's kind of a logistic, very complex, but that means that the total time students receive is not 100%, and that we are very worried about that.
Thank you, Adriana. Ayub, what would you say about the same topic? How do you deal with that in Tanzania?
The interesting thing in Tanzania, we don't even so things as just as usual. There is no physical distancing, no any precautions that are taken on the physical distancing. But at least the hand washing is ongoing. Physical not observed at all.
Thank you, Ayub. I think your country must experience a much better situation than many of us, the rest of us. Côte d'Ivoire, can we ask you the same if you have any measures for physical distancing, or how do you deal with that in your country? Côte d'Ivoire, vous avez la parole.
Comme je l'ai dit, la distanciation physique était rigoureusement respectée. Parce qu'au niveau du primaire, il y avait l'alternance au niveau des 6 niveaux. Et au niveau du secondaire, sur un effectif de 2 millions, c'est seulement 29%, un peu plus de 600 000 qui avaient repris. Mais avec la réouverture de la rentrée 2020-2021, je vous l'ai dit tantôt, c'est l'entièreté, la totalité des effectifs qui reprennent. Et donc, dans nos classes, il est difficile d'appliquer rigoureusement la distanciation physique. Alors, nous avons mis l'accent sur les autres mesures barrières, notamment le port du masque et le lavage, en tout cas rigoureux des mains, le lavage régulier des mains. Voilà les 2 mesures importantes sur lesquelles nous avons mis l'accent au niveau de la réouverture 2020-2021. Voilà, parce que dans nos classes, il y a des effectifs de plus de 50 élèves par classe. Et donc, il est difficile d'appliquer la distanciation physique dans ces classes-là. Et Dieu merci, avec le plan de riposte que j'ai évoqué tantôt, le taux de positivité est en train de baisser considérablement en Côte d'Ivoire. Et ce qui est salutaire et ce qui nous encourage dans les mesures que nous avons prises, parce que depuis la réouverture, nous n'avons pas encore notifié de cas à l'école pour cette rentrée 2020-2021. Donc, nous pensons que nous continuerons de mettre l'accent, en tout cas sur ces mesures-là, et intensifier la sensibilisation au niveau des cellules de veille que j'ai évoquées tantôt, pour que les apprenants eux-mêmes s'approprient, n'est-ce pas, les messages véritables de la sensibilisation autour de cette pandémie. Et toutes les parties prenantes sont dans la cellule de veille, du comité de veille dont j'ai évoqué tantôt. Dans les lycées, c'est les unités opérationnelles. Il y a le chef de l'établissement, un représentant des élèves, un représentant des éducateurs, un représentant des marchés scolaires, l'éducateur, l'infirmier du lycée. Donc, l'objectif, c'est de multiplier les messages de sensibilisation, de s'approprier ces messages de sensibilisation afin d'éviter la propagation.
Merci beaucoup, Côte d'Ivoire. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone, for the responses. I hand it back to Rob in a second. I just want to call all your attention that please fill out the survey that is being shared in the chat. We would like to know your ideas for future sessions, and probably we will have the chance to address all the rest of your questions in the next upcoming sessions. Rob, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annette. Thank you to my dear colleagues in Côte d'Ivoire, but in all 5 countries. Again, very much appreciate your contributions, your substantive insights. It's indeed an incredibly challenging time, and you've done just a Herculean amount of work in each of your countries, and I know many other countries are benefiting. We are at time, and we're going to respect everyone's time. Again, as Annette mentioned, you'll see in the chat the survey. Please do complete it. We will be organizing future webinars, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank, this partnership, and the main purpose is to facilitate this sharing of best practices and examples and lessons. And so, and with such a challenging time, I think we need these partnerships and we need to be learning from each other. And so again, thanks to everyone on the call for the solidarity, for the commitment, for the perseverance. And I wish you all the best, and please stay safe, everyone. And we look forward to follow-up discussions. Thanks again. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Rob. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you everyone. Thank you Annette and Aisling for all the stress and all the interactions.
But great job, guys. Great job, guys. I mean, there's some presentations were super useful.
Are you talking to us because we cannot hear you?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
but
We can. I can hear you.
Oh, why I can't? Wait.
yeah,
Oh,
no, this. Yeah. No. Which is the one I was just thinking. It was a great job, and several very interesting presentations. And a lot to learn. So thanks to all for the coordination. This is I know. I mean, for this hour and a half, it's a lot of work, but I think it's a lot of value for many of our clients. So thanks so much, guys. See you later.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
You guys did very well, and you took like the most amount of work. Thank you. So
Thank you.